Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. My guest today, Kelly Costanza. She's the Chief People Officer over at CAVA. Before we jump into my discussion with Kelly, quick reminder, my brand new book, The 8 Laws of Employee Experience, How to Build a Future Ready Organization, available for pre-order. You can go to 8exlaws.com. That's the number 8, exlaws.com. And it basically makes the argument that a lot of organizations around the world have lost their way and it's time to get back to basics. And that's what these 8 laws are. I also want to mention if you are a CHRO or a Chief People Officer, you can check out our CHRO group at futureofworkleaders.com. And it's for all the CHROs out there who are moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience. A lot of cool people in that group. And having said that, Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to speak with you. There's actually, so when I first moved to Southern California, I used to live in Northern California, and almost 4 or 5 years ago, we moved to Southern California. And when we were looking for a house, I had to stay with my parents for a while. So me, my wife, our 2 kids, our 2 dogs are all living with my parents while we were looking for a house here. And I was going to a gym in Woodland Hills, and right outside the gym, there was a CAVA. And so I'd always go with my brother and my wife. We would go work out, and we would always go eat CAVA afterwards. So I have many, many fond memories of CAVA. I love it.
Well, we
But
love that. Thank you for being a loyal guest. We appreciate
yeah,
it.
yeah. But for people who are not familiar with it, can you give us a little background information about CAVA? Who are you guys? What do you do? How many employees do you have?
For sure. Yeah. So we are a fast casual, Mediterranean, delicious, healthy food brand. And we are in 28 different states with over 400 restaurants. And we were founded by 3 Greek friends whose parents were immigrants and some refugees. And the whole concept of Kava was started because these 3 friends wanted to give their parents a career. They wanted to give them a better life. And they saw them
Hmm.
working odd jobs in restaurants, sometimes getting paid $1 an hour, sometimes not getting paid at all. And they really wanted to create something that was going to last and be meaningful for their family and friends. And so that's how Kava was born.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So are they still still friends?
They're still friends. They're still involved in different ways. So Ted Xenocristos is our chief concept officer, and so
Hmm.
he is partners with our chief executive officer Brett Schulman. So they call themselves co-founders. And the 2 other friends, Ike and Chef Dimitri, are involved in different ways as well. But yeah, they were really excited to start a full service concept. And when they were introduced to Brett Schulman a few years after starting that concept, he's the one who suggested that Kava evolve into this fast casual concept where you walk the line and build a bowl or you build a pita.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so we originally started as a full service concept. But to answer your other question, we are currently a little over 12,000 employees at this point.
Wow.
Yes, and we call them team members.
Yeah, you guys are growing quickly.
Yeah.
So today's conversation is going to be all around this theme of operationalizing culture. And as I told you before I hit record, every time I talk to various business leaders or CHROs, everybody always wants to talk about culture.
Mhm.
And then when we talk about it, it's always kind of from a superficial, high level. And I think a lot of people who are listening and watching this show, they want a deep dive into how do you actually make your culture come to life. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to spend an entire, almost full hour talking about all things culture and learning about some of the cool things that you do at Kava. So let's start kind of high level. What is the culture at Kava? How did you
Mhm.
define it and set it up? And then we'll talk about how you make it actually come to life.
Yeah, it's great, great start. And one of the things that I think HR leaders often do is they don't think about the culture and the mission for their team members and its direct connection to the company mission. And so the first thing we did was connect our mission for the culture to the company's mission. So our mission is to bring heart, health, and humanity to food. And we always say the only way that we can do that is to bring heart, health, and humanity to our team members. And so taking that a step further, when you think about your employee value proposition, you say, okay, well, what do we want to stand for? What do we believe in when it comes to the team member experience? And so we adopted a few years ago after the pandemic, Gartner came out with this concept of the human deal framework and team members caring about things like radical flexibility, personal growth, holistic well-being, shared purpose, deeper connections, and all of those headlines related to a feeling about the workplace. And I always say that when there were certain times where people were working at organizations before the pandemic, they went to work so that they could have their job be better or so that they could have their career be better. And I think after the pandemic, people started going to the workplace so their life would be better. And they had the expectation that the company would contribute to their full life in meaningful ways. And so we agree with that. And it's really part of our concept essence and believing that hospitality towards your team members is the most important thing that you can do, because ultimately they will then turn around that hospitality to the guest. And so that's kind of the high level of how we think about our culture and what we wanted to do then to focus on what to actually operationalize then.
Okay. And so did you, I guess for people when they think about culture, you kind of have the mission statement, you have the values that fall underneath that, right? So I guess from the mission, what are the values that you have? Does that translate then to behaviors that you have for leaders, for employees? Like maybe you can walk through, I don't know what your culture framework is, if that's what you
Yeah.
want to call it.
Yes, that's exactly right. So we have something called our beloved MVC, our mission, values, and competencies. And we launched this a few years ago. We did a company-wide launch. We did in person at our annual summit called CAVA Connect. We did an
Ah,
in-person launch of the mission, values, and competencies. So I just mentioned our mission. Our values are different values that we focus on: generosity first always, passion for positivity, acting with agility, and constant curiosity. And we have recognition for those values. So I have some values cards here. I'm not sure if you can see them, but we give people things like these
oh,
values cards, and you can write on the back to somebody and you can say why they were recognized for generosity first always. And in the back, we have in our restaurants a communication board where people take pictures, they celebrate people for the values they were recognized for. And there's some other programs we have connected to the values. And then our C is our competencies. So those are the behaviors that we expect from everyone at CAVA. And we have 7 different competencies, and those are built into our impact plans. So we bring them to life by holding people accountable for them, celebrating them, and also promoting them based on those behaviors. And then we also have programs like our quarterly MVC winners. So instead of an MVP, we have an MVC. And in front of everyone at the town hall, we recognize different people for exhibiting those mission, values, and competencies. So those are just a
hmm.
few of the programs that we have.
So as you know, I mean, a lot of people always talk about culture and they have a great mission statement, they have wonderful values, they write them on the walls of their company, they say them. But there's a difference between, I guess, visually representing them and talking about them versus making them come to life. And is there a key ingredient that you have that makes it that's the bridge between what they are versus actually living them and making them come to life? And what would you say that bridge is?
I think there's a few different bridges. And when you think about human behavior and what people respond to, right, it's a lot of repetition and it's recognition, right? So
Yeah.
we do a lot of rewards and recognition for the values and competencies. So I mentioned one of our recognition programs being the MVC Award. We also have this communication board where we celebrate people for living out the values and competencies. We have Slack channels where people are taking pictures and they're showing others how we've recognized people for exhibiting those behaviors. And then we also have different programs and different ways that we've operationalized the competencies, in particular in the restaurants. And so we have something called our CCT program, and that's a competency champion trainer. And so what we do is every year we ask restaurants what general managers and area leaders are really living these competencies. We go out into the restaurants or we go out into a certain city and we'll bring these leaders together and we will certify them. We'll give them a train the trainer certification. So they get
Mm.
this additional ability to say, I am a certified trainer now. and they can go back to their gardens and they can train other general managers and other team members on these competencies and how we want to see them brought to life. And so it's a really nice badge of honor for them to get, and also a way that we celebrate them. But we're always looking for ways to recognize, reward, and then put them into our training so that people believe and know this is what we stand for. Behaviors are just as important as the job that you do.
Okay. So let's unpack what some of those behaviors then are, and then we can maybe dive a little bit deeper into what some of those the programs are.
Sure.
So give us a quick refresh on what are some of those key behaviors that you're looking for that kind of align with the CAVA culture, and then do you break them down by seniority level, or is it just kind of behaviors that you expect across the board?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have 7 different competencies. They are things like emotional resilience is one of our competencies.
Okay.
Diversity cultivation is another one. Enterprise leadership is another. Service mindset, people development. And so what we do is across each role, we have the same competencies, but there's different behaviors expected of an individual
Okay.
contributor than there is an executive, right? So I have more responsibility to show service mindset in my behaviors than someone in the restaurant does serving the guest. And so we have very clear communication around what these behaviors are. And another way that we brought them to life is we have recipe cards. So we have a recipe card for every position in the restaurant and what the behavior looks like on the front of the card, and on the back, what it doesn't look
Mm.
like. And so we have
Ah,
in the moment coaching opportunities for people to pull the cards right off that communication board and say, hey, listen, in this guest interaction that you just had, here's why I want to recognize you for exhibiting this great service mindset. Or conversely, hey, here's what that behavior doesn't look like. And let me tell you what we just saw and why and how it can
interesting.
improve. Yeah. And so it's just another way to reinforce that behavior. And as recent as a few weeks ago, our executive team traveled to the Houston market, and I had an opportunity to pull the competency cards right off the communication board and talk to one of our general managers about a competency. I asked her, what competency do you think is your towering strength, and which one do you think you still have to work on? And then we had a coaching session right there in the middle of the restaurant about her
Hmm.
competency. So just another way that we bring those behaviors to life.
Very cool. All right. So, what would be the difference between, so use the service mindset example. So, let's say I'm a frontline worker. I'm in one of the CAVA locations, and I'm creating the bowls for the customers who come in, versus a service mindset for you as the chief people officer for the company. Like, what would that different behavior be?
Yeah. So an individual contributor who's working that line and interacting with the guest is expected to have great hospitality in both their verbal and nonverbal behaviors towards the
Okay.
guest. They're also expected to have that same type of hospitality towards their fellow team members. And that is spelled out again on these recipe cards with how we expect them to behave. For an executive, my responsibility is to model and coach and teach the service mindset competency to the enterprise. So I have to exhibit it across departments. I have to coach my peer executives on service mindset. They have to coach me. We expect peer-to-peer coaching. And then we're expected to also make sure we have training opportunities available to the enterprise so that everyone can understand what the competencies mean. And so as you grow in your role, you're expected to be a leader of the competencies. And if I were to summarize it, I would say as you grow as an executive or as a team leader, you're expected to become more of a teacher of the competency.
Ah, okay. All right. So that makes sense. So I like that. So 7 behaviors, and you map that across different seniority levels. So, and how many categories do you have? Is this like entry level, mid level, senior level, like 3 different layers?
Yep, we have something called a leadership framework. And so
Okay.
we have individual contributor level, and then we have a manager level, we have a director, we have a vice president or senior vice president, and then executive. And then, of course, within those managers and directors, we have senior managers and senior directors. But for the leadership framework, we go from individual contributor, manager, director, VP, SVP, and executive.
Okay. All right. So then across those seniority levels, you have those seven behavior, and it's funny. So it's just those seven main behaviors that kind of are the foundation for the entire culture across the company.
That's correct. In conjunction with the values and our mission, right? There's ways that people can live out the mission, there's ways that they can bring the values to life, but their behaviors are clearly defined for them. Every one of those competencies has around 3 to 4 definitions of that competency in a behavior sentence so that you can see what it looks like.
Okay. So then it sounds like it's not seven behaviors, it's seven competencies. And then underneath those competencies, there are perhaps maybe several behaviors that flow into that competency.
That's correct.
Okay. So then just to kind of recap the framework, just to make sure people can visualize. So first you have kind of the mission statement, right? And then underneath the mission statement, you have these values. You have these seven competencies.
Mhm.
And then underneath those seven competencies, you have those behaviors that kind of flow up to kind of create all of that.
Correct.
Okay. Is there anything underneath those behaviors, or is that kind of like the full sandwich?
Yeah, it's the full sandwich, and we really, I mean, I guess we could call it our MVC sandwich. It's a 3 layers sandwich, if you will. But we really have people living out that MVC, and they connect to acronyms. They connect to language that they can easily recite. That's also part of human behavior, right? Is making things accessible and easily understood by people. And so we often refer to our MVC as part of our biggest part of our culture.
Okay. So it seems like the first step for a lot of organizations would be to kind of map that stuff out. How did you even figure out what those values should be? How did you figure out what those behaviors should be, the core competencies? How did you even, because there are a million things you could pick from.
You're absolutely right. And every company has a different phase in its life cycle, right? Some may have well
Yeah.
established missions and values. And so when I joined the organization about 5.5 years ago, I joined at the beginning of the pandemic. And there was an opportunity for us as we were thinking about our future. We had just acquired Zoe's Kitchen. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the CAVA history or the CAVA story, but
No, no, not at all,
yeah,
actually.
so in addition to opening our own restaurants, about 6 years ago, we acquired another restaurant company called Zoe's Kitchen. And
Ah,
we ended up converting the Zoe's that we acquired to Kava's. And so Kava grew very quickly, and we were growing rapidly during the pandemic as well because we had to convert these Zoe's to Kava's. And so it was a perfect opportunity for us to take a look at our mission in general. And we had values, and we wanted to update those values. So we had some values that the company had started with, but embarking upon this new chapter in our growth and thinking about going public, we thought about, is it time for us to think about what our mission is and what we want our values to be? And so that was the first step. We took a look with the executive team, got together, and we started talking about what do we want our mission to be. So we created first the mission of wanting to bring heart, health, and humanity to food. And that really led us to, okay, what is the mission going to be for our team members with our employee value proposition? And then once we worked out the values, we led the executive team through an exercise of competencies and what competencies were. I brought to them a competency library. And then we did an exercise by which we said, okay, of all these competencies, we asked each executive to do a competency ranking. If you were to think about
oh,
CAVA over the next 5 to 7 years, and you were to think about the behaviors you want to see, what behaviors do we want to see? And they had to narrow it down to their top 10. Then we got together as a team and we looked at the voting across the executive team. And we actually, we tried to come to 6 competencies. We landed on 7, but we decided that we were going to focus on the behaviors we wanted to see over the next 5 to 10 years. And we didn't talk about what behaviors that we most often saw. I have done competency exercises in the past, and I do know that this is another way for other HR leaders to think about how to do competencies. You can look at what are the competencies you see most often in your organization,
yeah.
then which ones do you want to see, and then where's your gap? so that you
Yep.
can decide how to move forward. But we decided just to do what behaviors do we want to see so we could propel into the future rapidly. And that is how we did the competency exercise.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Because one of the concepts I have in the book is the idea of run your culture like an operating system. And like just like any operating system on your computer, it goes through updates and you make changes. But of course, we're not talking about making changes like every week, every quarter, every year, even, but through like big periods. Perhaps when you go through a crisis, new leadership, acquisition, merger, you kind of have a chance to revisit those things. How long did this process take for you to go through and talk to these leaders and do? It sounds like focus groups. What was this whole process like?
I would say it probably took us around 6 months to think
6 months.
about,
Okay.
yeah, I would say from the mission creation to the values and deciding those and this evaluation of the competencies. I've been part of organizations where it's taken longer, and the reason was instead of just asking the executive team, I have asked the enterprise in the past, right? Have the
Ah,
entire enterprise tell you what behaviors they most often see and which ones do we think we want to see. We decided to take the approach of defining it for the enterprise with the executive team just because we were growing rapidly. We were much smaller at the time, and we wanted to quickly have this MVC come to life. The other thing that we did, and I didn't mention this, was after we decided what they were, we went to our first CAVA Connect, and it was our first annual meeting where we brought all of our general managers together and area leaders above them, our support center team members, and we had a session where we launched our MVC, our mission, values, and competencies. We did education on the competencies because we wanted everyone to hear them at the same time. Then we rolled out that CCT program I was telling you about, and it's how we keep it alive. I would say because we were going through that acquisition, or we had just completed the acquisition, we were moving Zoe's team members to become CAVA team members. We were getting ready for the IPO. That I knew that in probably around 7 years, we would need to look at those behaviors again, because if you're a fast growth company, you're typically looking for different behaviors. And you know this, Jacob, the macro environment is really impacting businesses more than ever, right? You
yeah.
see the, changes in technology with AI, and there's going to be different behaviors we're going to need likely in the next couple of years, and it will force us to look at our competencies again.
Yeah, yeah. Is there like a regular cadence that you think this will fall into? Every like, I don't know, 2, 3 years, or just, when it makes sense.
I think it depends on the life cycle of a business, what type of business they are. Are they a brand new entrepreneurial organization? Are they an established large entity? And what is it that they want people to, how many people do they need to move through the adoption of change?
Yep.
12,000 team members is one thing, 100,000 team members is another. So I think it just depends on where you are as a business. But I do think the world is accelerating at a more rapid pace than I've experienced in my almost 30 years in the workplace. And, I think competencies used to be able to last much longer than they can today. I do think, my prior experience would tell me they could last 7 to 10 years, but I think now it's more like 3 to 5, 5 to 7.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Okay, so that's kind of the high level framework of how all these things fit together. Maybe now we can dive a little bit deeper into how you actually make these things come to life.
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing that immediately comes to mind is, are these things a part of employees' performance, salary, bonuses, compensation structure? Like, how do you infuse all these things into the day to day?
Yeah, so great question. And when I think about competencies and I think about behaviors and culture, I think of the entire employee life cycle. So I think about the full circle of a team member, and it starts with recruiting, right? It starts with how you
Yep.
market and attract the right people, and then how you onboard them, train them, succession plan and develop them before they go into that next job, which starts over again at the top of the life cycle. So the first thing we do is we hire people based on these competencies and values. So we have behavioral interview guides that we rolled out, and we have our leaders using, our recruiting team using in the interview process. So we evaluate people based on these behaviors, and we make sure that we bring them in. They're that they're able to do the job, of course, based on their experience, but will they be the right fit based on these behaviors, both for them and
Yeah.
for us? So that's the first part. Yes.
No,
You
no,
look
no.
like you
Go
had
ahead. Go
another
ahead.
question.
Yeah, no, I always have lots of questions. I was gonna, I'll let you finish before I jump in because I want to wait until you kind of have the whole thing.
Okay. So we evaluate and make sure that we're hiring people who have these competencies in the interview process. So we also use a personality assessment by the name of
Okay.
OAD, and we take a look at people's natural personalities and their natural state. And the personality assessment we use also shows us a section where if they are in a certain job, how does their personality show up in the job as well? So that's a part of the interview and selection process. And then in onboarding, we talk about our MVC and our training. Every hourly team member goes through training. Managers go through training and onboarding. Executives, everyone goes through different onboarding experiences. But in our onboarding program called the CAVA Way, we talk a lot about MVC. And then in our training program, so we have different training available to team members depending on their role. But we have a program that our academy general managers run for training external hires. And so you can become an academy general manager and you can be responsible for training new general managers at CAVA. And they even spend time on our competencies and behaviors, and not just our competencies and behaviors, but all of the components and different programs we have that bring the CAVA culture to life. And then they're in our impact plan. So we have performance evaluations that we decided years ago. There was a lot of conversation around nobody likes performance reviews, right? Nobody wants to do them. Nobody wants to have one. And so there was a move away from them to what we call impact plans. And that's more of a regular conversation about your goals and how you're doing against those goals. And so by the time the end of the year comes, you shouldn't need a performance review because you've had a regular conversation. And so we have the competencies built into the impact plans as well.
Hmm.
And then promotions, like I said, they're based on both your ability to do that next job, but do you exhibit the behaviors or competencies of that next job?
What's your philosophy or belief on the role of technology in all this? Because I remember even today, so I started doing this daily like employee experience news podcast where I share some of the top stories of the day. And even for today, as we're recording, one of the stories was that a lot of employees want more of the humanity into the recruiting process. And so what ends up happening is, employees are ghosting companies, companies are ghosting employees. A lot of companies are using AI, they're using technology, resume screeners, personality assessments, have a conversation with a bot. And at a certain point, if I'm applying for a job and I never even get to talk to a human, it becomes very disheartening to apply for jobs, and to speak with these companies. So, how do you use technology in a way that actually makes this whole process more human and not less human? And are you in favor of using tech and everything, or did you break apart some areas and say, okay, we're going to leave this for the people?
Yeah, it's a great question. At Kava, we really feel like it's important that human connection is at the center of a lot of what we do. And so we look at technology as a way to enhance the human experience, but not replace it. And so you'll hear our CEO often talk about the reason we don't have kiosks in our restaurant, where you can see them in a lot of other restaurants, is we don't want to replace that warm greeting that you get, that smile, that hospitality that you get by interacting with a team member at that point of entering the restaurant. And so we feel the same way in our recruiting process. And so I will tell you, we did experiment with AI. And so I know a lot of restaurant companies and other organizations are using AI in the recruiting process.
Yep.
And we did partner with an organization and we tested for more than a year, actually.
Oh, wow.
We had somebody in our recruiting process deliver guests, or excuse me, potential candidates to our restaurants. So this technology would scan social, it would scan different forms of social profiles and say, oh, you look like you'd be a great team member at Kava. You can go to
Hmm.
the restaurant tomorrow. There'll be somebody ready to talk to you. Here's your time slot.
Wait, wait.
And
So it would scan people's social, like LinkedIn and stuff like
yes,
that.
yes.
Interesting. And it would just
There are a lot of different vendors that do this now. There are a lot of
okay.
different vendors that do this, and they produce candidates and send them right to your restaurant.
Oh, and so will it just like send you a LinkedIn message that says, "Hey, this is Kelly from CAVA," and okay, no wonder I've been getting so much. Okay, this is starting to make sense now.
Yes, there's a lot of vendors out there now who are acting on behalf of the enterprise, and they're sending candidates right to you. What we found though was that the general manager wasn't always prepared, or we had candidates showing up at peak. So they couldn't even talk to the candidate because they'd come in from 12
Yeah.
to 2. And so we pushed pause on that relationship. Although I'm not saying that we would never go back to doing something like that. And we certainly look at AI as an opportunity for us to, again, enhance the team member experience. But we found that it wasn't as human as we wanted it to be. So
Hmm.
we're not using that experience at the moment. I do think that there is a great opportunity for us to get more efficient and speed up the interview process, because I know I hear from family members and friends all the time. Hey, I entered this interview process. I haven't heard anything in a week. I'd really like to know what's going on. What do I say? How do I reach out to this person? Is it appropriate to ask? And I do think there's ways that we could speed up our interactions with our candidates by using AI or some other forms of technology, and that we're looking at right now. But I do agree with you that people want to interact with humans.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I mean, even today, not that I'm looking for a full-time job, but I still get executive recruiters who reach out to me from some big companies, and they say, "Oh, we're trying to create this XYZ program. You'd be a perfect person to lead it." And I'd say, "Oh, I'm not really looking for anything." And then they say, "Well, you just have a conversation." And I'll say, "Okay, fine, I'll have a conversation." And I've done several of these conversations over the past few years. And so I have the conversation, everything goes well, and then everyone disappears. And I do these conversations just because I'm always very curious to see what it's like on the candidate side, because you hear stories about ghosting and you hear stories about people not responding and this and that, and I'm like, that can't be really true. And so I have some of these conversations just to see kind of like the process. And even for me, I've had many times where I'm talking to like these executives or executive recruiters over the past few years, and we have a great conversation. Oh yeah, we're gonna follow up. We're gonna do this next meeting. And I message, and they message me on LinkedIn like directly. It's a human profile, and I'll message them back and I'll say, hey, it's been a little while. I never heard anything. I'm just curious. Like, what did you end up doing with this? No response. And so it's shocking to me how so many companies out there complain about the war for talent, and it's so hard for us to attract and retain people. But your recruitment process sucks. And I'm not talking about you, but I mean in general for HR, the recruitment process sucks. So how can you go out there and complain about this war for talent when you don't even get back to people? And I know because it's happened to me so many times. And for me, it seems like a very simple thing. The companies that have the most human process will attract the most humans.
Mhm.
And it's not to say that you can't use technology or AI in some places to help you kind of find the best candidates and this and that. But I don't know. I sometimes wonder if we've gotten so obsessed with the tech stuff that I don't know. Maybe we're just losing sight of the basics of bringing people into our doors. I don't know. Am I nuts, or does that make sense?
No, you're not nuts. You're experiencing, unfortunately, what I think a lot of people who are candidates, as I mentioned, I have friends and family members who go through same experience. And, I hope that never happens to anyone who's a candidate at CAVA. We have a great group of humans on the talent acquisition team who are high touch human connection individuals who very much believe in getting great communication with their candidates, even if it's a candidate we don't choose. I do tell people that are experiencing these challenges that there's a lot that goes on inside of companies. You don't know if they're an internal candidate that they were also considering, and that person they're waiting on their, are they going to take this job? Maybe they did a restructure. Maybe something's happening in the business and they have to put a pause on new hires. But that, I think, is where our recruiters can fail to communicate because they're not sure what they can say, what they're allowed to tell a candidate. But instead of saying nothing, it's important to call, to email, to anything, to communicate with that candidate and say, hey, we have some things going on, and I can't really talk to you about the details, but I want you to know I'm still thinking about you. And they still have that high touch human interaction. But I do think that it is something that companies struggle with, is how to keep regular communication with any candidate that they've got in play.
Yeah. And it's funny, I talked to so one CHRO, the CHRO of Genpact. I was talking to him, and and let me get his name correct, Piyush Mehta. And he's telling me, and I'm sure you can probably relate to that. And they're a big company, 120,000 or something employees. And he's telling me that every day, every week, he's getting countless emails from vendors, from companies, from consultants. We have this HR technology, this AI that's going to change your life. It's going to change your recruiting. It's going to change your engagement. It's going to change your data and analytics. And he's like, at a certain point, you just have like part of your role as a CHRO, you got to filter all that stuff out because there's so much fluff out there. Do you get bombarded by that stuff as well? Like every day, Kelly, you got to check this out. This is fantastic.
I would say that right now my inbox from vendor solicitations are probably 80% AI related. And I think it's
Wow.
this race to get to the front of the line for vendor responses, right? And look, I have a lot of empathy for people who they have a
Yeah.
job to do too, right? Like I see every human as a human. On the other side of that email is someone who's working in sales and they have to make a sale, right? So they're just doing what they need to do too. But
Yeah.
I do think it's interesting, the AI discussion right now. I just attended a Chief People Officer Summit last week in New York, and it's a group of different CHROs and CPOs from different restaurant companies, some retail. And we had Gartner come and talk about the AI evolution and the three buckets that AI is falling into. One is worker productivity. One is the guest experience, right? And how might your brand evolve their interactions with the guests based on AI? And the third was innovation or new product creation. And right now everyone's just living in that first bucket of worker productivity. They're testing different tools and how might it impact speed for the recruiting process, or how could people do PowerPoints better? How might they write an email differently? And that's really what I think, all that we're seeing yet. I do think we're on the cusp of some different really fascinating AI potential for guest interactions or speed. But to your point, and to what we've been talking about, more than ever, what will be rare as AI advances is human interaction. People are going to
Yeah.
crave more and more human connection. And so we really believe, again, it's the center of our brand ethos. We believe in human connection. We believe in generosity. Our very first value is generosity first always. When you
Hmm.
walk the line, when you go to any of your favorite CAVAs in California, because there are many now for you to choose from other than the one you went
Yep.
to when you were first starting. So we have something called the love button. And our team
Huh.
members have the authority up to 4 times a day to give away a free meal. So they see somebody struggling, having a hard day, or maybe it's somebody who's never tried kava before. We have a literal button on the POS that says love button, and we give love to our guests by saying, here's a free meal today. I hope this makes your day. And we have so many stories of different interactions that guests write in about, like, oh my gosh, I was having the worst day and your team member noticed it and they brought a total smile and changed my day because they gave me a free meal. And so
Wow. That's cool.
those are things we're just going to keep building on and enhancing.
Yeah.
One of the other ones that we really believe in and have so much pride around, Jacob, is this program called Allies in Motion, or AIM. It's all centered around human connection. And the idea is that everyone can be an ally and everybody can use an ally, no matter who they are. Everyone has a life experience we know nothing about. And so what we try to do is bring to life an understanding between Kelly and Jacob. What is Jacob's story? Let me take some time and listen to it. And Jacob, Kelly, what's your story? Let me take some time and listen to yours. How were you raised? What hardships have you dealt with in life? What is it that defines your value system? And so every other Monday, we have something called the Monday Meetup, and we celebrate different underrepresented groups, and we ask people to tell us their stories. And you should see when people come to the Monday Meetup, and they listen to someone tell their story about, here's what it means for me to be Black in America. Here's what it means to me to have suffered through breast cancer. Here's what it means to me to have been abandoned when I came out and told my family I was gay. Like you listen to people tell these stories, and they're just telling their human story. And you should see the empathy and the love that comes through when people get to listen to a fellow team member tell them about their human experience. And I am convinced the more we talk about our human experiences, the more we will connect, the more we will build bridges, the more that we will bring this human-centered experience to life that is so desperately needed in our world.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, it sounds. I like that, the love and the other campaign that you have going on. Are there any other internal or external campaigns or programs that you have that you think are unique to CAVA?
I think that Allies in Motion AIM program I just talked about is really unique. I think one of the things that we learned and we had the benefit of timing on. So when I joined the organization, it was right after the George Floyd murder and the Black Lives Matter movement started. And we started to talk to our team members. We hosted listening sessions and we said, what do you think matters to CAVA team members? What should we think about when we think about how to build a more inclusive workplace? And one of the things that they mentioned was just the fact that the CEO and I were even doing listening sessions, right? They said, we would love it if we could do listening sessions. We just want to know we're cared about, we're heard and seen. So we actually, and when there are moments happening in the world or in the business, we have a licensed therapist that joins us and hosts listening sessions. It's part of
Hmm.
our well-being program. And she joins us at our annual meeting for CAVA Connect as well. And we have open times that people can reserve to just spend an hour with her and understand, what they might need from their own well-being. But when we bring people together and we host these listening sessions under our well-being program, you wouldn't believe the amount of feedback we get. I can't believe the company is willing to just have somebody who's trained in mental health that is willing to listen to our different perspectives and help to bring us together just by allowing us to speak and having someone to listen to us.
Hmm.
So those are some of the other ways that we bring that human connection to life, I think, that are unique.
Okay. So let's get back to, I know we only have a few minutes left, the operationalizing the culture piece. So it sounds like one of the things that you do is you infuse these behaviors into the compensation process via the conversations you have during reviews, during feedback sessions. And I'm assuming this is for leaders, for employees, for everyone across the board. Is there, how do you quantify that? So for example, if somebody is getting their bonus or their salary increase, how do you quantify, well, for this competency, you're doing like 80% of a good job, but you have 20% more to go? Because that's a challenge, right? How do you objectively quantify something that is potentially subjective? You know what I mean? Because that's a challenge that a lot of companies have, whether they
Yeah.
talk about skills, whether they talk about these human elements at work. So can you share a little bit about how you, either metrics or just anything on how you do that?
Yeah, I do understand that it is difficult to quantify or apply, some type of weighted metric to an impact plan and have that then turn into a score that turns into compensation. But we do have different programs that we help individuals bring to life those competencies that they need to work on. We do have mentors that serve to people who are trying to focus on building those competencies. And I would say that what we try to do with the impact plans and the bonus payouts in particular is we certainly do have business metrics that drive the payout of the bonus. But we also have an individual component. So 25% of your payout is based on how you perform as an individual. And that's somewhat rare at organizations. And I understand it. I've worked in different organizations with different philosophies around that. There are definitely organizations that pay the bonus completely on how the company performed. And so you're thinking, well,
Yep.
why does it matter
Yeah,
how
yeah.
I do, right? So we actually have your impact plan performance as 25% of your payout. So that is something that, again, we try to
Hmm.
put our money where our mouth is and say, we do believe in this. We do believe that your behaviors matter, and we're actually going to tie your bonus to it.
Interesting. Okay. And have you had any pushback on that? Has anybody ever said, well, that's your opinion. I think I'm doing better than what you're saying, or is it, you know,
There,
no fighting?
yeah, no, it's a great question. I know sometimes people set these goals and they forget about them until the end of the year, right? And it's like,
Yeah,
wait a second,
exactly.
it's a surprise to me. And I do think that our monthly reviews of these impact plans is a way that we've combated that. And the other is we've offered competency training throughout the year. So we have a different competency of the month. So let's say innovation and growth is one of our competencies. We'll highlight it all
Okay.
month. Our training team will offer classes on it that people can go to learn how to enhance that competency versus kind of being left on their own with not, any direction on how to improve it or different behaviors or ways to show up. So that's another way that we help people understand how to change that behavior through those training classes.
Okay. And it seems like on the ground floor inside the store is the main way that the culture gets operationalized or through those recipe cards, right?
Yep.
Where and it sounds like it's not just the lead. Can anybody give the recipe card to anybody else, or it's just the leader to the employee?
It's really the leader to the team member, but we do
Okay.
have, again, for anyone who's an hourly leader or the general manager, they can use those competency cards and show team members. We want
Got
everyone
it.
to be a leader, and we want everyone to have a career. So the best way you can do that is to understand what behaviors are expected of you. So that is something that I think will bring more to life as we launch something called our Flavor Your Future program. So our employment brand is called Flavor Your Future, and we are building a program for team members to grow to general managers or area leaders. And if they want to come into the support center, they can do that as well. But we're going to continue to enhance the training under Flavor Your Future so that we can have people continue to grow. We're adding a new position called an assistant general manager to the restaurant
Hmm.
so that the general manager can have a strong number two and a position that hourly team members can grow into. We're super excited about it, and there's going to be more information that we're going to post soon on this assistant general manager position. But Flavor Your Future is another program that we're excited to be launching here soon.
Can you share a little bit more about the flavor
Yeah,
your future? Like
yeah.
what is
So
that?
it's really important that we bring to life the intention that our founders had. And that was, again, if I go back to when I think of the guys, then the three friends that started CAVA and why they started CAVA, it was to give their family members an opportunity to have a career. And so we want to do the same. So we're looking for ways to have our hourly team members join us and know that they can run a restaurant in a few years. And so we're bringing in a new position, as I mentioned, the assistant general manager position. We're creating training for high potentials where they can go through a program to fast track them to that general manager position. And we're creating some compensation incentives as well so that we can encourage people to grow in the enterprise. And this year, actually, at CAVA Connect, we announced that we're also going to be giving to our general managers, we're going to add them to the annual stock grant. So CAVA is a really unique
Oh,
place in that our stock grants are in the support center. We go down to the coordinator level, and a lot of organizations reserve stock for executives or director and above. We believe in everyone being invested in the success of the enterprise. And so we just announced that general managers will be added to that as well. And we're super excited
wow.
about that. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. And then what about yeah, I call them ground floor employees, but so in corporate, are those recipe cards similarly there? Like, can your CEO come put a recipe card on your on your desk?
The behaviors are there. They're not necessarily on a recipe card on a communication board in the support center, but we have them electronically and they're available to anyone. Anyone can see what the behaviors are, and we showcase them in our impact plans. We actually have every behavior under every competency available for everyone.
Oh, wow. All right. Anything else that we didn't touch on as far as how you operationalize culture? I mean, we talked about the framework, which I think is the most important. Um, it seems like the leaders play a very crucial role with those recipe cards, with having those discussions with those employees. Anything else that we didn't touch on? For example, measurement, analytics, or data? I don't know. I don't know what I don't know, so I'll let you tell me what we're missing.
No, I think we've touched on quite a bit about how to operationalize culture and how to assess team members. And I always say doing your job is part of your success, and how you do it is the other, right? And they're equally important.
Yeah.
So you've got to be successful in delivering, but you also have to be successful in the way that you behave. And so I think some of the other things I would just acknowledge is that because we do care about the full human and we want people to have a full human experience, We're very thoughtful about what we include in our benefits as well. I mentioned our well-being program. We have a goodness fund where people can contribute up to $1 or more per pay. And if there's crisis or something, we make that available to people who have a need. And then we have a mental health program that we instituted years ago, where you and your immediate family members are able to have mental health benefits through Talkspace. So you can have either in-person therapy, you can have text, or however you choose, but it's available to all of our team members and their immediate family members. So we think it's important, again, to think about that full human and make sure that we give them that full human experience at CAVA.
At what point is too much though? And have you had to pull back on certain things or cancel certain things because the right is the scalability a challenge, right? I mean, you're offering so much now. Is it going to get more next year, 2 years, 3, 4, 5 years? And also, how do you balance the accountability between what the organization offers versus employees? Because at the end of the day, you have employees who still need to show up and they're adults, right? I mean, they have to take care of themselves, they have to be responsible, they have to contribute. They still also need to have the responsibility of having a job and knowing what that means and what that looks like. And it's always this delicate and I think difficult balance for organizations because they want to show that they care about people, but also they need to make sure that there's a fine line between, I'm an employer, not your parent. And also what can we, how far should we go in terms of benefits, in terms of mental health and this and that. So how do you talk to me a little bit how you manage that balance?
That's a great question. There's so much that's, I know, in the minds of different, not just CHROs, but CEOs. There's this,
Yeah.
how do we create a workplace that appeals to all generations with different beliefs about what work looks like? I will say accountability is one of our competencies. We do believe that being an accountable individual is an important part of the behaviors that you exhibit. So that is something that we focus on in the behaviors that we expect. And to answer your first question around what's too much, one of the things that we realized with our engagement survey and some of the ways that we were collecting feedback was survey fatigue. Our team members were like,
Mm.
okay, you're asking us way too much. How do we feel? What do we want? So we scaled back the number of times that we were doing the engagement survey. We do have still fantastic results from our engagement survey results, but there is definitely, I think, this overconsumption that people are experiencing, right? They have access to everything on their phones and they're constantly looking for information. They can get it easily. They don't want to be inundated with yet another email, another survey. And so that was one thing that we did pull back on. But I do think you make a good point about how do you keep people understanding they have a job to do, they do have metrics they have to hit. And again, they do get the majority of their compensation in the bonus tied to the company's performance. So ultimately, we all have goals we've got to hit. General managers have certain scorecards that they're held accountable to in order to receive their bonus. But there's a definite balance between we've got these strategic priorities. We've got to hit these strategic priorities, and we have a responsibility to ourselves, even as shareholders, right? There's so many shareholders we're responsible to, including the shareholders that we all are. And so we want to fulfill the obligation that we have to all of us.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's I think in the coming year, 2, 3 years, it'll be even more of a challenge and a discussion topic for a lot of leaders. Before we wrap up, what's next? So, what's next as far as employee experience, operationalizing your culture? Where AI is obviously a big topic of conversation. Are you able to give a sneak peek into what is coming next for CAVA?
Yeah, I think that sneak peek is the Flavor Your Future campaign I mentioned. We are very much focused on wanting to be the brand that people see as a place where you can have that career, where you know that internal development is something that you will receive. And so we're going to be talking a lot more about how do we do that and become that employer of choice for individuals who want to have a career and not just a job. So that's really what we're focused on now and into 2026 in the future, is really increasing the number of people that we have moving into our jobs internally. And then I think as far as AI goes, we're testing right now. So I'm working very closely with our Chief Information Officer, Beth McCormick. And we just finished a pilot of 3 different areas of the business or different modules, excuse me, of AI that we're testing and learning about to see when we will implement those different tools into the enterprise. And again, focused on those 3 areas. Will it impact worker productivity? Will it impact the guest experience? Or will there be some type of innovation? And so those are definitely ways that we will think about working differently in the future also.
Very cool. Where can people go to learn more about you, CAVA? I know you're on LinkedIn. Anything you want to mention for people to check out?
Yeah, please go to cava.com/careers to learn more about how you can have a career at CAVA, which is something that we're passionate about. All of our benefits are there as well. And of course, on LinkedIn, you can follow me at Kelly Costanza.
Kelly, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to meet you and talk with you, Jacob.
Likewise. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.